Good morning. Welcome, and thank you for joining us here in the Farish Theater at the Lexington Public Library, and also to those of you who are listening or viewing at home. My name is Lynn Flynn, and as a member of the League of Women Voters of Lexington, I'll be serving as moderator for this forum this morning. This forum for primary candidates for the Lexington-Fayette Urban County at-Large Council is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Lexington, the Lexington Public Library, and the Frankfort-Lexington chapter of the Lynx Incorporated. The forum is being videotaped and will be available later for viewing. Please check the library and League of Women Voters websites for the schedules and links. All of the at-large candidates have been invited. Because of the large number of candidates in this race, we randomly divided them into two groups. Candidate Connie Kell was not able to participate. We're following the League of Women Voters policies and procedures for the forum. In order to give the candidates a fair chance to be heard, we've randomly drawn for the order of opening remarks, and then we had a separate drawing for the order of closing remarks. The candidates will have 90 seconds to introduce themselves first. For the first round of questions, we're going to be using questions that were developed by the forum sponsors. Following the order of the drawing, each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to a question, and then the other candidates will be asked to use up to 30 seconds to put additional information related to that question. For the second round of questions, we're going to be using audience questions, and each candidate will have 45 seconds to respond. We may also ask some short answer or yes/no questions of each candidate. And then finally, each candidate will have 90 seconds for closing remarks, and that will be based on a separate random drawing, the order for the closing remarks. So the candidates in the order of the first drawing, and they're seated at the table in that order, are Mr. Clarke, Ms. Miller-Johnson, Mr. Wallace, Mr. Miniard, and Mr. Hamill. Mr. Clarke, could you please go ahead with your 90-second introduction?
Well, thank you very much, Lynn, and thanks to the League of Women Voters and the library for giving me this opportunity. And I want to say that my career basically is as a teacher and a professor. And after teaching public schools, I was at the University of Kentucky in the School of Music for some 43 years. 21 of those years was as director of bands. 14 of those years was as the director of the School of Music. And then I retired in 2011 and immediately got into politics, ran for council successfully, and spent a term on the council. Very successful term, I think, and very, very enjoyable. Now, I must say that my re-election effort was unsuccessful, but that did not deter my love for public service. So currently, I'm serving on 8 different boards and commissions, including the city's Board of Adjustment, the city's Water Quality Fees Board, the city's Tree Board, the Picnic with the Pops Commission, the Board of America in Bloom, the Board of the Arboretum Friends, and other things. So I'm still involved in public service, and I love that very much. So now I want to take that experience and put it to work for the entire city as an at-large council member. And I can tell you that I'm very excited about that possibility, and it fits my interest, my personality, my experience, and certainly my love for Lexington. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Miller-Johnson.
Hello, my name is Lillie Miller-Johnson. I am a progressive pragmatic, and I am trying to make everything that I do count. I have always been concerned about people and the community and in which I live. I grew up here in Fayette County. I went to Bryan Station. Then I went to Eastern and for a couple of years. Then I took some classes at UK and graduated here in Fayette County while I was working. I worked for the state for about 10 years. I worked my way up from clerk to, I was a caseworker for child support enforcement. I've worked as a caseworker in child support enforcement, I came up with several ideas that saved them money and time. And these two ideas, not only one of them got us on computers, the other one saved the court and the attorneys lots of time and money. My reason for running is because I feel like that I have been working in the community for a while and coming up with ideas like this shelter. I was a supervisor with the Conservation District. This is my third term, which will be ending in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace.
Good morning. First, I want to thank the League of Women Voters, the Lexington Public Library, as well as the Links for hosting this forum. My name is Adrian Wallace, and I am from Lexington. I was born and raised here. I was born in Coolevin Apartments. I love this city. But I decided to run for office because I believe there are a lot of issues that plague Lexington today. I believe that we don't need any more politicians, but rather public servants, people who believe in building community, promoting economic growth and stability, and expanding educational opportunity. I'm excited about the opportunity to continue my service to this city and to this nation. I believe, if I'm not incorrect, that I'm the only veteran running for this race, not only in this race now, but as well as that serves on council. And Lexington just happens to be the 10th worst city in the nation out of the 100 largest cities for vets. So I promise to work whomever becomes our next mayor to make sure that this city works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Miniard.
My name is Matt Miniard. I want to thank the League of Voters, Women's Voters, and the library for giving us this opportunity to come forward and present our views and our ideas. I'm looking forward to becoming a public servant, serving the people of Fayette County. I'm running on the platform, I'm going to lower your property taxes. I'm also going to push for lower matching taxes on your payroll, which will increase more jobs. I have won awards here in the city for being an infill developer. I've always been an advocate for affordable housing, better use of public funds. I'll be asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hamill.
Thanks to the League for this opportunity. I grew up in rural Meade County with my parents who worked at Fort Knox. I was surrounded by technology from a very early age. I was the whiz kid in computer class, which took me to UK, and I graduated with a telecom degree, and I got to see lots of good Kentucky basketball. In 1993, I married my wife, Jennifer. We moved to Atlanta for 5 years, but after having our second child, we moved back to Lexington 21 years ago. As a parent, you must make decisions for what's best for each of your children, okay? And that's an important point. And I've been blessed for the last 15 years to run a basketball league in this town. Glendover Basketball is one of the largest recreational basketball leagues in this community. And the thing is when you run a league, you have to make decisions based on a community for what's best for each individual participant. So you have to look at things from multiple perspectives. So, who is Todd Hamill? Well, I'm your brother, I'm your uncle, I'm your father, I'm you. And I'm running for city council to represent you. And the fact that I have business experience, I understand technology better than anybody who's currently running. And if you don't think that technology doesn't impact your day-to-day life at all levels of socioeconomic growth, at all levels of stages in your life, then that is false. So you have to have these perspectives of business, community compassion, and technology to be able to execute the leadership in the future. And I feel that I'm ready for that opportunity.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to our questions for the candidates. The candidate who drew number 2 in our random drawing, Ms. Miller Johnson, will take the first question and have 90 seconds to respond.
Thank
So, your question, Ms. Miller Johnson. Drug overdoses have become a serious problem in Lexington. What can the council do to address this?
First of all, I know that they are now passing out the antidote for drug overdose, and now family members and people that know about people that are taking drugs can get a hold of that. But I think even more important is that we should place those at places where people tend to be in, and those people that in the areas that they need to be in. And I think that we should have a task force or a group of people that oversee and make sure that we have set up stations where people can have them readily available.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace, you'll have 30 seconds for additional comments.
Yeah, I think that the answer is treatment. Far too often, we over-incarcerate for drug abuse, and we need to see our friends that struggle with addiction see it as a disease. We need to treat that issue. I've served on the board of the Lighthouse, which is a substance abuse and recovery program for the last 4 or 5 years, and we have a 12-month program where we absolutely free. We take men into that program. There's another program for women in Nicholasville. We take them into that program to walk them through that addiction, that disease.
Thank you. Mr. Miniard?
I'm also for more treatment. I'm even going to be so radical as to say we ought to give the people the drugs if they'll just show up at the jail, turn themselves in, and now they're off the streets, and now they're in a rehab program. I know it's radical, but something must be done. We're losing the war on drugs. There's not been any significant progress made in it, and new and radical changes must come forward, and that's why I'm advocating the position I just put forward of giving those folks a chance to go to jail and get their drugs and get off.
Thank you, Mr. Miniard. Mr. Hamill?
You won't hear me say the war on drugs. Drug users are people in our community. We have to help them. They have mental health issues, they have economic issues, they have overprescription issues in the doctor community. We cannot sit back and say this is the solution. There is no one solution, but we have to look as a community and find ways to organically treat these things. There's nothing going to be legislated that's going to be treated. There's nothing that we can send through the prescription through lawsuits to treat it. We have to be able to look at holistically and make the members of our community healthier.
Thank you, Mr. Hamill. Mr. Clarke?
Thank you. It is indeed a very serious problem in our community. I think that the problem is root causes. It's not just a matter of drug use. It's a matter of what causes this. Why are people using drugs? We have to deal with the accessibility of drugs. We have to realize that in some cases it's a matter of jobs, it's a matter of housing, it's a matter of lack of future, and those are the things we have to deal with, rather than saying, okay, we have to get rid of the drugs. So I think it's very important that we look at root causes. Thank you.
For our second question, it will go first to Mr. Wallace, and here is your question. What can be done about the increase in gun-related deaths in Lexington?
Great question. It bothers me. When I opened, I said that there are a lot of issues that plague our city. We have a lot of people who say that Lexington's doing great and we don't need to change anything. I disagree. We had 28 homicides last year. That's a record. Already 10 homicides this year, 103 shootings, gang issues through the roof. When I got into ministry after I got out of the military, I started a nonprofit called the Bishop and Chase Foundation to focus on prevention and intervention. Our last police chief and I worked on these issues for years, and even he would admit that enforcement, once it gets to the enforcement stage, it's too late. We have got to focus on families, on prevention and intervention efforts, and I believe that our city government has got to partner with our city, with the school system, to make sure that that happens to best serve our children and our families.
Thank you very much. Mr. Miniard?
Gun control is a big problem. Just tougher standards for owning a gun, who can own a gun. I would move council to enact stricter gun control laws in our city. There's no reason someone should be shot unless it's self-defense. There's no reason that people should not be allowed to own a gun. But all these shootings, it must stop. I'm for stricter gun control.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hamill?
I think the greatest thing that's disappointing about this is that as my kids graduated and my kids had good opportunities in education, they knew more guns in their life than I've had in my entire life. And when you step back and look at that, once again, you're going to hear a recurring theme in everything I say. Government is one part of a three-legged community effort between community civic organizations, between the government, and through the business community that we attack all the problems. And economic disparity and mental health are the issues that we need to attack to deal with guns. Excuse me.
Thank you. Mr. Clarke?
Yes, certainly is a serious problem again, but I'm going to go back to the previous question. Do you realize that the very large percentage of murders in this community caused by guns, of course, were related to drugs? Do you realize that the 10 murders that we've had in our community so far, we didn't have 10 murders until July of last year? So I think we find that something like 90% are caused by drugs.
Thank you, Mr. Clarke. Ms. Miller-Johnson?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes, if I can locate it. What can be done about the increase in gun-related deaths in Lexington?
Again, I agree with the gentleman to my right, that part of the reason is drugs and drug-related crimes, and I'm pretty sure that is the reason. As far as this is concerned, even Cleveland has had a problem in their inner city with drugs. It's not a sickness that can be corrected.
Thank you, Ms. Miller-Johnson. My apologies, folks. 30 seconds is very short for the quick hit.
I had, thank you.
So for our third question, we'll begin with Mr. Miniard. And Mr. Miniard, here is your question. What are the most pressing needs related to traffic in Lexington, and what would you do to address them?
Well, traffic's always been a problem. Part of that problem is people come into Lexington from outside Fayette County and add to the traffic problem. Probably the best way to deal with the traffic problem, more public transportation. You know, think of one person sitting in a car compared to 60 people sitting in a bus, takes up about the same space. So I'd be an advocate for more affordable public transportation, which would eliminate a lot of the gridlock, particularly like you see on Nicholasville Road, would eliminate a lot of the traffic in this town.
Thank you. Mr. Hamill?
I think it's very important that when we stop and talk about real issues that we have to deal with today, that we have to look at where they are going forward. And the fact of the matter is that the younger generation looks at a sharing community. Why do you think Lyft and Uber are growing? They don't want cars. They don't want to deal with cars. We have to sit back and look at this type of scenario and say, okay, I want to deal with traffic today, but how do I provide the lifestyle that the generations who are coming up want to live?
Thank you. Mr. Clarke?
Thank you. I think public transportation is extremely important. And part of the problem with transportation, public transportation right now, is the fact that it is expensive to run, and we don't have enough bus routes. They're not close enough to our communities, and consequently, the people are saying, "Well, I can't. I have to go too far to find a bus, and it takes too long to get there. So we need to subsidize our bus transportation even more than we are today."
Thank you. Ms. Miller-Johnson?
I believe that in larger cities and in some smaller cities, you park and ride. So drive your car to a certain spot. We need to set up more spots like that, park and ride. And even for the elderly, we have to provide some way for them to feel comfortable about riding the bus. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace?
Yeah, 51% of our workforce in Lexington lives outside of our city. And they all attribute the fact that it would take them the same amount of time inside of the city to commute to work as it does for them to live in Scott County or Jessamine County or Madison County. That's an issue of infrastructure. We need to fix our infrastructure. We also need more walkable spaces. Lexington has an urban service boundary, and so we have to focus on equitable infill and redevelopment to make sure that we're dense, and then focusing on that mass transit, that we have a plan for mass transit, that we make our LexTrans system more efficient and effective.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Wallace.
thank you.
Our next question will start with Mr. Hamill, and this is a long one. Lexington has several areas of the city in which it's difficult to buy affordable, good-quality fresh food, also known as food deserts. What can the Urban County Council do to eliminate these food deserts?
My wife and I both work on the north side of town, so I can tell you exactly what you're talking about with the food desert. And we live on the south side, so we get so much more variety. And it's so discouraging to sit back and talk to people and tell them how they need to eat healthy and not give them the opportunity to do it. We just talked about transportation where people can't get to these places. So how do we do it? There's a bunch of little new things. You have to start thinking outside of the box when we look at these problems. For instance, we're talking about urban infill. In major cities, they're looking at putting gardens and community greenhouses on top of roofs. They help with rainwater, they help with food, they help with cooling of the building. We have to start thinking about things. Lexington labels itself a progressive town, but we don't sit back and think about these issues. Community gardens are a very simple way. We teach people that they can do a tomato plant outside of their house, and guess what? They start looking for ways, and that brings the demand. And once demand increases, Kroger shows up with fresh foods. Aldi over there on the north side shows up with fresh foods. Whole Foods moves over to the north side. And we start to get rid of this. But we have to teach our citizens why and give them easy tools to make this happen.
Thank you.
Oh, I have 15 seconds. I'll keep going. Okay. And you know, the biggest thing is once people realize that they eat healthy, they feel better. And that's what we're trying to do as a community, is to make people feel better about where they are.
Thank you. Mr. Clarke.
Thank you. I agree certainly, absolutely about community gardens. I think that we have not done what we need to do in encouraging our citizens to do that, and even in their own homes. I think there is a position in Fayette County that gives us the kind of expertise that we need to tackle this problem. And I think that person is very, very good at her job, and we need to listen very carefully to what she's saying.
Thank you very much. Ms. Miller-Johnson.
As a supervisor with the Conservation District, I have sent out letters to all the council people and information for the urban agriculture, and that is growing we're using boxes or your porch or wherever you have if you have it, you can set up a garden in that kind of facility. And that has been one of my major pushes as a supervisor.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace.
It's an issue of public health, income inequality, and cultural norms. The CSA program is one of the things that I want to do through the city to work to expand the CSA program. I want to tell a quick story. I have some friends, Jeff and Sherry Maddock, that lived in the East End, and they had chickens. I went over for breakfast one morning, and the eggs were brown. And I said, I ain't eating those brown eggs. I said, the eggs are supposed to be white. But see, that's a cultural thing, right? Because I'm used to going to Kroger and getting eggs. And so we have to change cultural norms and begin to help folks make more healthy choices.
Thank you. Mr. Miniard.
I'm for more farmers market. Instead of having one farmers market, we should have a series of farmers markets. And then we should encourage people to do some, their own farming. I made the statement to someone earlier before coming up to the stage that, you used to drive through the countryside and see all these local gardens. You just don't see that anymore. So we probably need to re-educate our people on how to do a home garden.
Thank you. For our next question, Mr. Clarke will start, and this is another long question. What is your position on future growth and development issues as they affect Fayette County related to zoning, sprawl, and the urban service boundary?
Thank you. That's a great question. And I'm very much opposed to any increase in the urban service district. Put that out in front because I think the Lexington and Fayette County its identity is simply what we do historically within the urban service district and what we do outside that district in terms of our wonderful agricultural products. Yeah, we are the capital, the horse capital of the world. There's no question about it. And there are reasons for that, and we need to maintain that at all costs. Now, the problem is that we have to then use our urban service district to grow in terms of housing and jobs. So we're talking infill, and we're talking redevelopment, we're talking mixed use, and that's going to take a great deal of effort and imagination and creativity to make that work. And I know that developers have a problem with this. They want more land, and I certainly understand that. And so I think one of the things that maybe will come up later, but we need to be thinking more on a regional basis rather than just focusing on Lexington. We need partnerships with our surrounding counties so that we have room to do things there as well. Because some people live here and some people work somewhere else, and some people live someplace else and work here. And we need to develop that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Miller-Johnson?
Now, what was the question again?
Yes.
Sorry. I did get part of it. But
What is your position on future growth and development issues as they affect Fayette County related to zoning, sprawl, and the urban service boundary?
I looked at some of the issues that are coming up with infill, and I believe that most of it has got to do with partnerships with not only the government, but individuals and companies that are willing to look at a better growth situation. But I also think that urban agriculture is very important to the growth in this community. I believe that trees are important to us, and that's how, sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace?
In reference to zoning, there's entirely too much red tape. Many of the developers that I know that want to do things affordable face a lot of barriers to that. We need smart growth. We realize that Lexington is growing, that we have a population of 315,000 now. By the year 2050 or 2030, we'll have 350,000, 375,000 people. We have got to become more dense. We have to focus on our main corridors, and we also need to take a look at our small area plans at which areas can expand and which areas do we need to protect.
Thank you. Mr. Miniard?
Oh, I won an award for being an infill developer. You know, when you look at this city and you can't go out and buy a lot to build a house on, it's a real problem because only certain select people can develop land in this county. It gets even worse. I'm for increasing the height of the buildings in the town and upgrading the sewers to accommodate these multi-story buildings, which will protect the bluegrass and be more affordable in the
Thank you,
long
Mr.
run.
Miniard. Mr. Hamill?
This is quite possibly the most important question that we have as a community. Zoning and growth are what we struggle with because it seems to be where we're, most conflicted. The fact of the matter is everybody agrees on infill, everybody agrees on protecting the bluegrass. As a leadership, we have to agree that we have to be able to fund both of those priorities equally, or else we're not putting priority on both of them. So we have to put our money where our mouth is and recognize that developers don't build in town because it costs more than putting a shovel in the grass.
Thank you. We're now going to move to the audience questions. You'll each have 45 seconds to respond to each of these questions. And our first audience question will go to Ms. Miller-Johnson. And the question is, this is a long one. Our local chamber has been given a lot of authority to encourage business development, yet their work has not improved job creation for our blue-collar workers of color. What is your plan to make sure that all efforts benefit all residents?
I believe that we're looking at that we've been thinking inside the box. We're getting the same businesses that we've always gotten. We have not advanced or looked ahead. My thing is, I'm going to think outside the box. I'm looking at those type of situations where we are not just looking at the restaurants, and also partnerships. This is really important that we work together. And there's going to be, for me, I would be pushing toward partnerships and looking at what they could bring to the table.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace?
First, I think that we need to take a good look at the workforce investment dollars. We have the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act for a reason. We have the Mayor's Training Center that we need to bring back under the Mayor's office and expand that, create jobs. We need more entrepreneur-centric policies. I think about my mother, beautiful mother who's here in the crowd today, who ran a business for years in the 90s, but could have used the support of a city to help her create jobs. As I say often, many of our small businesses need to have that infrastructure built, that support to build, to grow their small businesses. We need to focus on the local businesses that actually create and grow our economy.
Thank you. Mr. Miniard?
I want somebody to recognize this gentleman in a wheelchair here. He's obviously got a question that he would like for written down. That,
We have it.
okay, you have it? Okay. That being said, you know, I think this mayor's training program is an excellent idea. It should be brought back. It is very, very important that everyone in this community have the same chance that everyone else has in this community. And those who don't have what everybody else has should be giving extra incentives and extra opportunities to make sure they get what everybody else has. That way, we do not fail as citizens of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Lexington has a lot of problems, and most of them are looming out in the future. If we don't do something about it today.
Thank you. Mr. Hamill?
So the question was specifically about blue-collar workers of color, and I want to have you stop looking at people in distinctions. We have technology disruption that is changing the way that our economy operates. Blue-collar workers of the past aren't blue-collar workers of the future. If we're worried about robots taking things over, train people to repair robots. Okay? You have to be able to look at things in a new perspective. And the next 5 to 10 years are going to be pivotal in how we transform the Lexington economy. And if we want to watch out for a recession that's going to come, we have to be able to look forward and not be naive. I found out last night a friend of mine got laid off 3 weeks from his 40th anniversary at his job. It's generational. It's not just of distinction of race.
Thank you. Mr. Clarke?
Thank you. I think the first order is to really support the concept of minority business. Lexington is doing that, but I don't think we're doing enough. That's an important part of our culture, and we need to really push that. Also, it's important that we continue the job fund and the workforce development. Just visited OWL, which is a workforce development company, and I was amazed at what they're doing, and that these are the kind of things that we need to continue to do and do more often. And that would be a major accomplishment if we can do more of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question we will start with Mr. Wallace. The cost of housing is outrageous. The average one-bedroom apartment rental is $800, and most people cannot afford this. What can we do about assuring affordable rental housing?
I feel that very much so myself personally. I have a family of 7, and for years I've been renting a home. I'm still a renter that I paid $800 a month for. The owners of that home needed to sell it, and so I had to find a new house, and I couldn't find anything less than $1,200 a month that would fit my family. It's ridiculous, and we have got to ensure we have more affordable housing. Right now, our Affordable Housing Trust Fund is funded at $2 million. Rick McQuady, who manages that fund, says we need $3 million today. We have got to make that investment. We make investments in courthouses for $32 million and Rupp Arena for $30 million. I think that we can make sure that we protect the most vulnerable citizens in Lexington.
Thank you. Mr. Miniard?
Affordable housing is the biggest issue facing this whole community. there's just, as a builder, as a developer, there's just too many zoning restrictions. There is too many code enforcement restrictions. It is not productive to build affordable housing under these sets of laws. The biggest problem is there's only one or two players in this whole market that have lots to build houses on. We need to take the city up. To take the city up, we have got to do something about our sewers. They've got to be upgraded. The whole plant's got to be maximized to meet the growth at 2025. Affordable housing is getting to be the single largest issue facing this community other than
Thank you, Mr.
just the
Miniard.
ridiculous property taxes.
Mr. Hamill?
I think as I started to run for city council, there's a lot of things that you learn. And one of the biggest things I learned was that affordable housing is not just a lower income issue. As we have economic prosperity and we do these projects where neighborhoods are being revitalized, we are pricing people who live there out of their neighborhoods. And that goes across all levels of middle income. So our affordable housing issues are not only for the lower levels of incomes, but also for the middle. I agree with Mr. Wallace. As a governmental entity, we're going to have to sit back and have some prioritization of our funding and look at what our community needs. Because if you want to attack drugs, guns, everything else, give them a place that they're proud to live. And that's not just a house, that's a community. And we have to be able to make sure that they have those opportunities.
Thank you. Mr. Clarke?
Yes, thank you. I think part of the problem with affordable housing in itself, it's not the housing itself. The problem is the cost of land. And that's been created simply because we are land poor. There is available land. We're going to have to find ways to deal with mixed use and redevelopment, and those are the things that is going to take to have a kind of the affordable housing that we really need. We're talking about that now, and I will say to all of you that Vice Mayor Kay has done a great job in presenting the whole concept of affordable housing. And it's working, but it's not working well enough. We need more money to develop it, and I think we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Miller-Johnson?
Well, I disagree. I think we're not looking at the materials. We need to look at new types of forms of housing. The housing that they're building now with materials and the labor and the land. Inside Lexington, the land is outrageous. You have to pay 3 times as much. Outside, it's high too, especially in Lexington, and it doesn't even make sense. The land is sitting there vacant, and so you're not using it, so why overprice it? Well, I'm looking at different types of housing, and we did it in the early centuries, house raisings and stuff like that. I was instrumental in getting Habitat here, and I will work
Thank you.
diligently for affordable housing.
Okay, we'll begin with Mr. Miniard for our next question. What is your plan to create and sustain a true partnership between the Fayette County schools and the city?
Well, we're going to have to look at the cost of running the schools, particularly the middle schools. We're going to have more community feedback and listen to what the needs are. And then we need to get some real experts in here to help isolate the problems. Every teacher I talk to clearly says the elementary schools are good. It's the next level of education is where we're failing these kids. Maybe some of it needs to be home sourced. Maybe some of it needs, it's a big problem. Each one of these separate problems is adding to a bigger problem in the school. We need to segregate the problems out, isolate them, figure out what they are, and then solve them one at a time, and therefore.
Thank you. Mr. Hamill?
I think when you talk about a partnership between the city government and the schools, we have to be able to sit back and look at some of the things that the schools are struggling with. Obviously, it's safe environments. It's school choice. We look at some of the initiatives that are coming down from the state level, and we have great programs in Fayette County schools, but the kids can't get there. The East Side, the technical centers, the IB programs, the academy, but they're limited to where the kids can go. The city can help facilitate transportation so the school doesn't have to do that. The city can help facilitate the safe communities around it so kids don't feel like they have to have a gun to get to school. And, once again, back to the mental health of the parents, to provide a warm, loving environment for the kids when they go to school will help the school in their mission. That is our job, to help those parents feel that way.
Thank you. Mr. Clarke?
Thank you. I want to say that I've been in every single elementary school, every single middle school, and every single high school in our city as part of my job working with the organizations in the instrumental music program. I know the schools, I've met the principals, and I can tell you that on my platform, one of the things that I want to do, and I desperately want to do this, we have to form a partnership with the city. Now, folks, it's not the city's responsibility to create good environment in the school, but it is the city's responsibility to form a partnership that would be very, very close and working for each other. Each entity of that partnership must be involved.
Thank you. Ms. Miller-Johnson?
I hate to do this to you, but I need you to repeat the question.
Yes, let's locate it here. What is your plan to create and sustain a true partnership between Fayette County schools and the city?
Again, I think that the school system is a part of the city. Therefore, it should automatically be a partnership. We should automatically want the best things for our children. We should be working to instill this in our children. Even the parents, I think we need to make sure that the parents are more involved. You don't have to be so involved that you ignore the fact that your children need you to step up. If the parents step up and show the children that this is important, that their education is important, and continue to work with the city, and the city work with the parents to work with the children.
Thank you. And Mr. Wallace?
It's a great question. We actually have within our 2020 vision a platform and a format for a city-school partnership. It blows my mind that our city council and our school board already don't have this partnership in place. We're serving the same kids and the same families. We saw guns in our schools recently. The reasons that those babies felt the need to carry guns on them is because of the issues in our community. That is an issue for our entire community, for our city government to make sure that they deal with. The other issue is we have to protect our public education. Under our new our gubernatorial administration, they want to push charter schools. Our mayors have to fight against that as authorizers, make sure whoever our mayor is, that they don't authorize charter schools and that we protect public education.
Thank you. So for our next question, we'll start with Mr. Hamill. And this is another long one. In the era of the Me Too movement, what role should the council play to ensure that Lexington is a safe space for all women?
So I'll start by saying, I was raised in a matriarchal family. My great-grandmother was a saint. And I don't just say that. Everybody who knew her was a saint. And she taught me that two primary lessons. Number one, you never stop learning. And number two, you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now, when we talk about issues of gender inequality, racial inequality, any of these type of things, it comes down to a basic thing, which is respect. And if you all can't see a theme in what I'm trying to say I want to be a leader who sits up here and models respect, teaches respect, and calls it out, and we deal with it when it happens. So in the Me Too movement, in the vein, we need to give women the ability to be empowered to call it out and feel safe that we can protect them.
Thank you. Mr. Clarke?
No, thank you. I couldn't agree more with Mr. Hamill. I think that's exactly what we need. It's a matter of respect. It's that simple. If we respect women, then there won't be any abuse. There won't be any inequality. And we have the kind of culture that we need where we see women as equal. in anything, whether it's jobs or a position in the community or government. One of the things that we found that it was very interesting that when I was on council, that council became a majority women. And so they have a place in our government as well as a Me Too place in our culture.
Thank you very much. Ms. Miller-Johnson?
In this age of Me Too, I feel that as a woman, and I've held a supervisory position, and it seems that when I speak up and I hold that position, then I'm looked at totally differently. And if it's a man standing up and holding a position, it's a whole different issue. And I have been fighting that battle, and I have did it by my actions. I don't get mad. I follow through with my actions and what I really need to get done. You can't always agree with everybody, but if you're right, you have to stand on that right. And as we, as women, need to do that and not do concessions when another woman is in charge.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace?
Yeah, I have 4 beautiful baby girls, and I will do everything that I can to protect them and teach them the way that a man should respect and treat them, that they would not put up with somebody that didn't respect and love and honor them. We have to make sure that we hold people accountable who don't treat women the way that they should be. The other thing is I agree with Mr. Clarke that when we had a majority of women on council, that we honored that, we respected that, and in fact, I was the president of the NAACP at the time, and we gave them an award, that we make sure that we fight, as was our mission, for the political, social, educational, and economic equality of rights of all people, to fight that discrimination. We have to close wage and pay gaps. I have people who believe that women should be paid less because they can't do the same job as women. I disagree, and I think that we have to make sure that we fight for a just wage for them as well.
Thank you. So our next question will start
didn't
with...
get,
Oh, I apologize, Mr. Miniard. Thank you for calling that to my attention. Mr. Miniard?
I'm sitting here in broad daylight, folks. Well, first of all, I'm for women's rights. The women of our society are grossly overlooked. They're taken for granted. They need to, along with other folks, they need to bring back the suffragette movement in this new era and show the world what they really are, how strong they are physically and emotionally, how talented they are. And they're the backbone of our society, folks. The women are grossly held to inequality standards, and it's going to take awareness of it. You know, instead of just turning your cheek like good Christians, they need to hold people accountable. They need to show who these people are discriminating against them. They need to stand up for the rights.
Thank you, Mr. Miniard. Our next question will start with Mr. Clarke. And again, I apologize for having missed you the last time, but we will start with Mr.
Well, I'm
Clarke
being
for the next
discriminated
question.
against. I never get my say. I never get recognized.
Let's move on with the question so we all have time to answer. Thank you.
I'm being discriminated against.
The question is, knowing the increase in the aging population will continue, what innovative plans would you put forth to meet the needs of that population? Mr. Clarke?
No, thank you. That's a great question. I'm certainly not a young person. And so I look at this problem as something that Lexington can solve. We have a wonderful new senior citizen center. I've just been in it recently. As a matter of fact, went on the table. I was at one of their sessions and had the opportunity to speak to folks there. But you know what? As wonderful as it is and as used as it is, I don't think that's enough. I think there are community centers around the city that we need to develop more. And as a matter of fact, I think we need a second senior citizens center. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Miller-Johnson?
And if we're talking about the Senior Citizen Center, I understand that they have little outlets across the city. The new one is really nice, but they have little centers in the community centers and stuff like that for senior citizens. They have classes and stuff that they can go to. And I'm for the fact that the senior citizens need a place. but I think they need to extend the hours maybe. And this is what the senior citizens have said. And it doesn't stay open late enough for them to, people that are work, they don't have time to come in and do whatever they need to do. So I'm for advocating
Thank you, Ms.
more
Miller
time.
Johnson. Mr. Wallace.
Yeah, I'm a minister, and I visit nursing homes often, and I see the need for more community and more support services. As we said earlier, we have an affordable housing issue in Lexington. We need more places that, as older generations need more support, that they can sell their homes, that they can afford to do that. Currently, they can't afford to sell their 3, 4, 5-bedroom homes and move into something smaller to downsize because of our affordable housing issues. And so we need to make sure that we address that. The other thing is when we talk about infill and redevelopment, that we have walkable spaces. There's a lot of research done about creating the density so that a lot of our older folks have the ability to walk to the pharmacist and walk to the doctor. These are things, especially once they're unable to drive, that we as a city have to plan for. It's about smart growth.
Thank you. Mr. Miniard.
Well, clearly the senior population is not being adequately met by the city. We don't need one senior citizen, we need 3 or 4. And those 3 or 4 senior citizens need to have extended hours. The doctors in this town are doing a great job. They're prolonging the life of the elderly. Too often they're neglected or forgotten, overlooked, and underserved by the urban county government. One senior citizen center for 300 and some thousand people is a social injustice.
Thank you. Mr. Hamill.
I think Mr. Miniard hit on a very important point. I mean, we have to look at the growth in the seniors population is dramatic as more and more of our baby boomers start to retire and look at the next phase of their life. Mental health in that world has got to be addressed, and we have to understand that they have despair in things that the world is changing around them. So when we talk about things that, why can't we do this or do that, their world isn't necessarily changing that fast. We have to look, like Mr. Wallace said, at a little more density. We have to look at their lifestyle, transportation. I'll close because 45 seconds isn't long. And a quick story to accentuate this. I have a 90-year-old great uncle. All he wanted to do was watch Andy Griffith. And I came up with a great technology solution for him to do that. But I didn't count on the fact that he couldn't see the buttons on the remote. And you have to be able to look at things from their perspective and their life when you're making decisions on what you're going to do.
Thank you. I hate to stop the questions now, but we're going to have to turn to closing remarks. The candidates had a second drawing to determine what order people would do their closing remarks in, and that order is going to be first Mr. Hamill, then Mr. Wallace, Mr. Clarke, Mr. Miniard, and closing up Ms. Miller Johnson. So Mr. Hamill, would you like to go ahead with your closing remarks?
Thank you, Lynn. First off, I had a lot of fun. This was good. I want to thank the league, and I want to thank all of you all who have come, and I want to thank everybody who's watching on video today. If you haven't caught anything from what I'm trying to do up here, I'm trying to instill a passion in what we do as a leadership. I'm not naive to the fact that government just serves as a role of 3 legs of a community. Government has the responsibility to do the planning, run the administration, do the budgeting. I get that. Okay? We have social and civic organizations that have the responsibility to reach into the communities and deal with people face to face. I get that. I understand the business community is what drives the economic engine. But I sit here today to tell you that we need consensus, and you need to have people in those roles who are passionate about doing things and who care about each and every member of the community. Whether I'm playing basketball at the Dunbar Center with my youngest, or I'm over on the south side, sitting outside having a beverage, everybody in this community is part of it. I want to close with this. I was taught to aspire that anybody can be president, and that you should aspire to be president. That united we stand, divided we fall. That is our state motto. And that as a neighbor, you have to love your neighbor as you love yourself. An important part of that is you have to love yourself. And if you're battling demons within yourself, you can't love your neighbor. And as a leader in this community, we have to be able to go and help people become productive members in this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace.
I just want to thank you all again. Thank you to the league, to all the other partners, and for you all for being here this morning. As I said when I opened, I decided to run because I want to build community. I want to promote economic growth and stability, and I want to expand educational opportunity. I want to make sure that everybody in Lexington feels as though they can be seen and heard, that regardless of what zip code they live in or what country that they come from or their parents or grandparents came from, that they know that Lexington is their city, that they feel valued, that they can live in a city that they can thrive, be safe, raise a family, that they can feed that family. Far too often, we see the issues that plague our city that start with our youth. We have got to focus on our young people. We have got to make sure that we have affordable pre-K, that our city works with our school system to do that, that we have after-school programs and summer programs, that we close the persistent opportunity gaps that plague so many of our families across our city. I wish we had more time, but again, I thank you all for listening this morning, and if you would like to hear more about our 2020 vision, I ask you to go to our website at www.wallaceforlexington.com, also on social media at Wallace for Lexington. Thank you again.
Thank you. Mr. Clarke.
Thank you. Once again, I want to express my passion for this great city. And I want to serve this city once again on the council. And this time, I'd like to serve as a council member for the entire city. As I think of my role as a council member, I want to assure you that I will work tirelessly for you as a council member, and I will work as if it was a full-time job. And also, I want to assure you that the decisions that I make on the council will be based on absolutely what is good for Lexington. It will not be based on personal gain. It will not be based on what is good to get reelected, and it will not be good for what's popular. Just recently, I found what is called the Air Force Credo. And I was really amazed by this and very impressed by this. And I want to tell you what the Air Force Credo is. It says, integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all that we do. Don't you wish all politicians would follow that? And I guarantee you, if I'm elected, that's exactly what you will get in me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Miniard.
Oh, I'm just looking forward to serving the people of Fayette County and making it a better community by taking on issues and taking on stances that a lot of people wouldn't, and saying and doing things outside the box that make people aware of what's going on. Affordable housing is a really, really big problem. The sewers and the sewer capacity and the maintenance and the safety and the soundness of them are going to be an even bigger problem. I also want to assure each and every one of you, upon my election, I will cut your property taxes. I will cut your payroll taxes. That you will be better served, not only by the government as a whole, but I encourage individual groups and individual people to unite with me to make Fayette County a better place. Thank you. I'm looking for your vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Miller-Johnson.
First of all, I want to say vote for me because I have already stepped up. I have been working on these issues, just about every issue. Housing. I was instrumental in getting Habitat here, which is affordable housing. The most you could pay is $100 or $150 a month for your housing. If you don't know about these programs, check with me. I don't have a website set up at this point because I look at it this way. Even with a website, you can only say what you want people to hear. I have shown actions. I have also advocated and sent out letters for the food situation, urban agriculture, which I advocated when I first started as a supervisor with the Conservation District. I'm instrumental in getting a shelter downtown so that the people that sell the vegetables would have a shelter when it rains so they could still sell their food. I have worked diligently in this community with human rights issues. I have made sure that they got a mediation so that people can go in without having to go to court first and maybe work these situations out. I have worked in every area that we have brought up, and I feel that I am the person. I've been doing the work So why not come in and make sure? And I am ethical.
Thank you very much. So I really want to thank all of the candidates for participating this afternoon. You all have been wonderful.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank our sponsors, the Lexington Public Library, the League of Women Voters of Lexington, and the Frankfort Lexington chapter of the Links Incorporated. The deadline for registering to vote is April 23rd, so it's right upon us. If you have not already registered, please do so, and please be sure to vote in the primary election on Tuesday, May 22nd. Thank you all so much for joining us, and let's give the candidates a round of applause.